Good evening, everybody. So last time that I read you one of these books that I'll show you, it was a new story or a new take on Mulan. This one is all about Aladdin and Jasmine, and it's called A Whole New World, A Twisted Tale. So it'll be a different look at what Aladdin and Jasmine have for their story. I'm going to read you the very beginning of the book, and then also try to read chapter 1 too. And I brought my tea here in case I get a little dry and I need a drink. So let's see what this story has in store for us. Now, like the other one, there really aren't any pictures, lots of words. So I'm going to read it like this. If I do come across a picture though, I will show you. So the prologue, that's the kind of like the introduction almost. A high white moon cast its light on the city below as brightly as the sun was said to shine in the northern countries. White mud brick buildings gleamed like pebbles from a faraway beach. The golden onion domes of the capital glittered like a dream against the pale dunes in the dark, starry void. The heat of the day had long since retreated into the desert, and the city, which had drowsed through the hot afternoon, was finally coming alive. The streets filled with people drinking tea and gossiping, laughing and visiting friends. Old men played chatrong on boards set up outside cafes. Children stayed up long past their bedtime, playing their own games on the sidewalks. Men and women bought rose-flavored ices and trinkets from nighttime vendors. Life was noisy and exuberant in moonlit Agrabah. Well, not everywhere in Agrabah. In another part of town, the streets were silent as shadow and black as death. It was not safe for any of the gaily dressed people to be there. Even the locals tended to stay indoors or stick to unseen alleyways and secret passages that riddled the area out of view from the streets. Here, the white walls of the buildings were faded and pitted, mud peeling away from their brick underlayers in great swaths. Half-built timber structures were the only evidence of an ancient sultan's dream to improve the district, to widen the roads, to bring in water. After he was poisoned, the whole project was dropped. Now, the skeletal remains of his grand plan whistled in the desert wind like corpses hanging from gibbets. This was the quarter of the street rats. This was where thieves, beggars, murderers, and the poorest of the poor lived. The children no one wanted. The adults no one would hire for any kind of honest work. All of them made their homes there. The orphaned, the unlucky, the sick, and the discarded. It was a whole other Agrabah. Among the huts and hovels, the falling down public buildings, the decaying houses of worship, was one tiny home that was slightly better kept up than the others. Its mud walls looked like they had been whitewashed at least once in the past decade. A broken urn outside the door contained a clutch of desert blooms, kept alive by someone's regular application of precious water. A proper rug, albeit in tatters, lay in front for visitors to leave their sandals on in the unlikely event they owned a pair. Through a keyhole-shaped window, passers-by could hear the soft sounds of a woman humming. If they peeked through the window, through the wooden screen, they would see her, a kind-eyed woman who wore her rags with the grace of a queen. Her clothes were clean, as was the pair of pants she was carefully mending in a spotted shaft of moonlight that came through the window. A loud knocking sounded on her door. 3 strikes, and very powerful. No one in the street rat district knocked like that. Always it was furtive, and often in code. The lady looked surprised, but carefully set down her work and adjusted her scarf before approaching the door. "Who is it?" she called, fingers on the handle. "It's me, Mom," said a voice. The woman smiled with pleasure and unhooked the latch. "But Aladdin," she admonished laughingly, opening the door, "you know better than to—" She stopped when she realized 4 people were standing in the doorway. One was her son, Aladdin. He was scrawny, like all the children of the street rats, barefoot with dark skin and thick raven black hair, like his father's, which was covered in the dust of the street. He held himself as his mother had taught him, head high, chest up, street rat in name only. His friends, if she could use that word, stood a little to the side, giggling and looking ready to bolt. If there was trouble, of course, Morgiana and Duban would be involved. Aladdin's mother clenched her teeth as their sly eyes and obvious zeal to get away. Behind Aladdin stood a tall, skinny man in a long blue robe and matching turban. Akram, the dried fruit and nut seller, he had her son's shoulder in a bony grip that threatened to tighten if the boy so much as thought about escaping. "Your son," Akram said politely but angrily, "and his compatriots, once again they were at the market stealing. Empty your pockets, street rat." Aladdin shrugged endearingly. As he did, he pulled the insides of his pockets out, revealing dried figs and dates. He was not so careless as to let them fall to the floor, however. "Aladdin," his mother said sharply, "you wicked boy!" "I'm so sorry, good sir. Tomorrow, Aladdin will run errands for you all day. Whatever you want, he'll fetch you water." Aladdin started to protest, but a look from his mother silenced him. Juban and Morgiana laughed at him. "And you two should as well," she added. "You are not my mother," Morgiana said insolently. "You can't tell me what to do. No one can." "It's unfortunate you don't have a mother like this poor woman," Akram said sternly. "You'll wind up with your head on a spike before you're 16, girl." Morgiana stuck her tongue out at him. "Come on," Juban said, a little nervous. "Let's get out of here." The two scampered off into the night. Aladdin looked after them dolefully, abandoned by his friends to punishments they all deserved. "You would do well to avoid their company, I think," Akram said thoughtfully. "But all three of you are lucky it was I who caught you, and not another. There are some vendors who would demand your hand in payment for the fruit you stole. Here, let me wrap up your goods to take them back with you," Aladdin's mother said, taking the fruit from her son and looking around for a suitable cloth to hold it. "That's all right," Akram said uncomfortably. His eyes darted around the tiny dark hollow. "I have already packed up for the day, and a hard-working woman who is alone should be punished for the sins of another. Consider it a gift." Aladdin's mother's eyes flashed. "I do not need your charity. My husband will return any day now," she said. "Cassim will have made his fortune and will take us to a place more fitting for his family. I'm just ashamed of what he has to come back to in the meantime." Of course," Akram said slowly, soothingly. "I eagerly await seeing him again. He loved my cashews." Aladdin's mother basked in the glow of someone else's memory of her husband, as a second hand as it was. Aladdin slumped. Akram's hand returned to his shoulder, but instead of the hard pinch of an angry captor, it gave the nervous pat of someone who felt sorry for the boy. This only made Aladdin feel worse. "Here now, is everything all right?" A market guard, one of the younger ones, strode out of the night. He held a cudgel in his hand and had a serious look in his eye. "I heard there was a disturbance at your tent, Akram." "It is nothing, Rasul," the merchant said, just as soothingly as he had talked to Aladdin's mother. "A misunderstanding. It is all sorted out. Thank you for your concern." The guard, whose only sin seemed to be indulging in a little too much pastry, did not press the matter, as other guards might have. He saw the quietly determined woman, the dejected-looking Aladdin, the poverty of the house. "All right then, Akram. I will walk you back to your tent. This is not a safe place for respectable people like yourself to be at night." "A thousand thanks, Rasul." Akram gave Aladdin's mother a bow. "Peace be upon you." "And to you," she said, nodding her head. "And thank you." When the merchant and the guard left, she closed the door wearily and ran a hand through her son's hair. "Aladdin, what are we to do with you?" "What?" he demanded, no longer slumped but grinning like a thief and jumping up and down with excitement. "Everything worked out, and look, we have a feast tonight." He excitedly pulled more figs and dates out of his pockets and put them in a chips bowl. And then, from the sash that held up his pants, he pulled fresh almonds and smoked pistachios, and from somewhere under his scrap of a shirt, cashews. "Aladdin!" his mother admonished him, but she was trying not to chuckle. "I did it for you, Mom. You deserve a treat. You never get anything for yourself." "Oh, Aladdin, I don't need anything except you," she said, taking him in her arms and holding him tightly against her. "Mom," Aladdin whispered into her rose, "I've seen you give me the biggest part of whatever we have to eat. It's not fair. I just want to take care of you." There are a lot of things that aren't fair, Aladdin. She drew back from him, still holding his hands and looking into his eyes. That's just the way life is, which is why it's so important for street rats to take care of each other. That's a good instinct you have. You should always look out for your friends and your family because no one is looking out for you. But that doesn't mean you should become a thief. Aladdin looked at the ground, chagrined. She put her hand under his chin to make him look up at her. Don't let life's unfairness, don't let how poor you are decide who you are. You choose who you will be, Aladdin. Will you be a hero who looks after the weak and powerless? Will you be a thief? Will you be a beggar? Or worse? It's up to you, not the things or people around you. You can choose to be something more. He nodded, lip trembling. He was too old to cry. He was. His mother kissed him again and sighed, then moved past him to examine the fruit. Maybe it's because you're just alone here with your mother all the time, she said partly to herself. You don't have any playmates except for those good-for-nothings Dubin and Morgiana. You need a real friend, or maybe a pet, or something. Yes, a pet. But Aladdin wasn't listening. He moved to the window and pushed aside the screen. This was the best, the only good thing about their house. Due to a trick in the zigzag streets, a hole in the mind of an architect, they had a perfect view of the castle. He looked at the white towers, even whiter under the moonlight, the glittering onion domes, the colorful flags, flying from spires so pointy and perfect, they looked like they could pierce the sky itself. You can choose to be something more. All right. Well, now we have chapter 1. And this one is called All This for a Loaf of Bread. Perhaps there was a moon in the sky somewhere, but her brother, the sun, ruled now, and everything faded into the whiteness of the hot day, which was even hotter on a glaringly bright, sun-bleached roof. Safe! Aladdin said with a grin, clutching his dearly gotten treasure. He took a quick look over the edge of the building to make sure no one saw him up there, his dark arms flexing with easy strength as he held his chest off the rough bricks. Then he sat down, relaxed, getting ready to break his precious prize in half. His large, clear brown eyes twinkled in happy expectation. 1 loaf of bread, more valuable than all the cold, glittering gems at the bazaar. The little monkey next to him chattered in anticipation. Abu had been his last gift from his mother. Aladdin's father, of course, had never come back from seeking his fortune abroad. Aladdin had never believed in that fairy tale anyway, so it was no great loss. But his mother had been afraid of his becoming too wild, too much of a loner without a real family. She thought a pet would tame him, and perhaps it had. Except that he stole for both of them now, and lunch is finally served, Aladdin said, gesturing at his friend with the bread. Stop! Thief! Abu fled. Aladdin leapt up. Somehow, the market guards had actually managed to clamber up the ladder onto the roof behind him. 2 made it up anyway, and with an enraged Rasul following close behind. These days, he wore the striped turban crown with a black onyx that marked him as captain of the guard. Despite their run-ins, even Aladdin had to admit that the man had risen honestly through the ranks. But that didn't mean Aladdin liked him. I'll have your hands for a trophy, street rat, Rasul bellowed. He puffed as he dragged his body up the ladder. He must have been doubly annoyed by the effort he had to expend to get up there. All this for a loaf of bread? Aladdin asked, exasperated. He had specifically chosen to lift it from one of the carts loaded up for a royal outing, a picnic for the Sultan, for one of his desert kite-flying romps, or something equally ridiculous. As fat as he was, one tiny sultan couldn't possibly have missed 1 little loaf of bread. But apparently the guards could. And under the law, if an accuser chose to, he could have a thief's hand chopped off in punishment. And Rasul's scimitar was looking particularly shiny and pointy in the sunlight at that moment. So Aladdin leapt off the side of the building. Aladdin was many things: quick, strong, clever, agile, fast-thinking, nimble. He was not rash. So while the guards stopped short, shocked at what seemed like a deadly, incredibly insane act, and only mildly nervous Aladdin plummeted down toward the street, grabbing at the clotheslines he knew would be there. There was, of course, always the chance that the ropes wouldn't hold, but Aladdin had luck on his side. Throwing his hands out only resulted in being hit in the head by the clean laundry and getting rope burns as he slowed his descent. When it grew too painful to bear, he let go and landed with a bruising, bony crash on the dusty street. There was no time to reflect on his safety, his luck, or any injuries that would have to be looked at later. He had to plan his next move immediately, to stay one step ahead of the guards who would be hurrying back down to see what happened to him. The widow Gulbahar's robes were tangled around him. It occurred to Aladdin that if no one saw, he could easily wrap himself up in them and disguise himself as a pious, albeit ugly, girl and sneak out through one of the harems. He paused as loud feminine laughter erupted above him. He looked up to see the widow herself leaning out, a widow, and smiling not unkindly at him. Two other women stood nearby, where they'd been enjoying a good gossip before his exciting arrival. That would be their only pleasure today before the task of finding food and work began. "Isn't it a little early for you to be in trouble already, Aladdin?" Gulbahar teased. "You're, ouch, only in trouble, ouch, if you get caught," Aladdin protested, trying not to show pain as he rose and joined them. He hoped that they'd gotten the hint as he swirled a cloth around his head and neck. He leaned on the wall in what he hoped was a feminine way, throwing his hips out and keeping his back at the end of the alley where the guards would enter. Gulbahar rolled her eyes and shook her head. "Aladdin, you gotta settle down," she sighed. "Get a nice girl. She'll fix you up." The other woman nodded in agreement. They knew about nice girls, being far removed from the definition, but they had to eat, and often, in Agrabah, nice girls didn't. "There he is," Rasul suddenly called out. He and the whole squad of guards stomped down the alley, closing off Aladdin's exit. "Now I'm in trouble," Aladdin said. He turned to go, but Rasul must have put all his remaining anger and energy into one furious lunge. He managed to grab Aladdin's arm and spun him around. "This time, street rat, I'll..." But before he could finish this threat, a screaming little monkey leapt onto his head and tore at his eye with sharp claws. "Perfect timing, Abu," Aladdin said dramatically for the benefit of the women watching. Then he ran. He scooted around Rasul and managed to duck past the rest of the guards as they grabbed at him ineptly. 10 of them weren't worth one Rasul, thank goodness. He was the only one Aladdin needed to worry about, and he knew the streets almost as well as the boy did. Aladdin ducked into what looked like a crack in the city itself, where two buildings crumbled and tilted into each other, leaning on each other like old men. Aladdin ran under them and wound up in a badly kept courtyard. A dry and useless fountain stood in the center. Once, long ago, it had worked. Maybe when the Sultan cared about things being nice for the poor residents of Agrabah. Rasul appeared at the opposite side of the courtyard, scimitar raised. "Do not think you can escape back to the maze of the eastern streets, Aladdin," he said sternly. He almost smiled when he saw the surprised look on Aladdin's face. "Oh yes, I know your plan, but you have broken the law. You must accept your punishment." "You're really gonna chop off my hand for stealing one loaf of bread?" Aladdin said, trying to buy time as he bounced lightly on his toes, circling around, keeping the fountain between them. "The law is the law." Aladdin feinted to the left, then tried to lunge to the right. Rasul wasn't fooled at all. His scimitar lashed out to the right. Aladdin ducked, sucking his stomach in, but he didn't come away unscathed. A tiny ribbon of scarlet unfurled across his skin. Aladdin hissed at the pain. Rasul paused. "Perhaps if you explain to the judge, he will be lenient. He will weigh your circumstances, but that is his job. Mine is to bring you in." "Really? I thought your job was to eat baklava." "You're slowing down, old man," Aladdin taunted with a howl of rage. With a howl of rage, Rasul brought his scimitar down as hard as he could. Aladdin dropped into a ball and rolled out of the way. Sparks flew when the point of the scimitar hit the copper pavement. He scrambled up rickety old scaffolding that barely held his weight. It certainly wouldn't support Rasul's. The guards swore in frustration, and Aladdin ran as fast as he could, leaping from rooftop to rooftop in a random pattern, without a clear thought or plan. He concentrated on just putting as much distance between himself and the market, as he could before descending into the quieter, darker quarter of the street rats. A chittering scream announced that Abu had finally caught up. He leapt onto Aladdin's shoulder and clung there while the boy, still being cautious, kept to the shadows and ducked into nearby empty houses. Through their cracking windows, out their gaping doors. Finally, he felt that he could stop when he came to a cul-de-sac so decrepit and useless that it acted as a makeshift garbage dump for the slums. No city workers came to take the refuse away, and it grew in piles that the poorest of the poor picked over, hoping for an overlooked scrap. It was smelly, but it was safe. Whew! The old man's getting slower, but he's getting smarter, Aladdin admitted grudgingly, clapping the dust off his pants and vest. And now, esteemed Effendi, we feast. He settled down at the base of the wall and finally broke his bread, giving half to Abu, who grabbed it excitedly. But just as Aladdin was about to take a big welcoming bite, the clatter of something hitting the pavement stopped him. He expected guards. He expected to run again. He didn't expect to see two of the smallest, scrawniest children in an Agrabah. They jumped, scared by the noise they had made themselves while picking through the garbage, looking for something to eat. When they spotted Aladdin, they didn't quite cling to each other, but moved closer for safety. Their eyes were huge. Their bellies were shrunken. Only on closer inspection could he tell one was a girl. Their rags were shapeless and they were very, very skinny. "I'm not gonna hurt you. You look familiar. Have we met?" The children said nothing and hid whatever they had. Bones, melon rinds, behind their set backs. Street rats take care of each other. The words of his mother traveled across the years to him. "Here," he said, getting up slowly without making any sudden movements. He knew what it was like being afraid that anyone bigger, healthier, or older than you, or older than you would hurt. He knew what it was like being afraid that anyone bigger, healthier, or older than you would hurt you and steal whatever you had. He held his hands out, one empty in peace, the other with the bread. The two children couldn't help staring at the bread. "Take it," he urged softly. They didn't need much compelling. The girl, bolder, reached out and took it. Trying not to grab, she murmured, "Thank you," before immediately tearing it almost in half. She gave the larger piece to her skinnier, tinier brother. Abu watched this interestedly, chewing on his piece. Aladdin felt a lump of anger form in his throat. When was the last time those two kids had a full meal? Or a good, long, clean drink of water? This was the way he had been as a child. Nothing had changed. The Sultan still sat in his beautiful golden domed palace playing with toys while people starved on the streets. Nothing would ever change until the Sultan or someone woke up and saw how his people were suffering. Aladdin sighed and lifted Abu onto his shoulder. He walked home slowly, belly empty of bread, but full of anger and despair. So that is the story. A Whole New World. I read the beginning and then chapter 1. There are lots more chapters in here. Lots and lots. So, I hope I get to read this whenever I get home with you girls. And I think it's going to be a really good story. So today is Mommy and Daddy's anniversary. So honey, happy anniversary. We've already been discussing about how amazing my Facebook post saying happy anniversary was. So I know you truly appreciated it. And I will be calling you guys later. I really miss you girls, and it is getting close. It's almost the end of January, and then February comes, and then hopefully just a few weeks in February, and then I'll be on my way home. I really can't wait. I miss you guys a lot. Love you. Bye.